You know what's sad, Sophie? You're 32 and still showing up alone to family dinners. When are you going to get your life together? Vanessa's voice cut through the Thanksgiving table like a knife through warm butter. She twisted her engagement ring as she said it, catching the light just enough to make sure everyone noticed. The diamond was huge. Of course it was. I felt my mother's eyes flick toward me, then away. My father studied his mashed potatoes like they held the secrets of the universe. Marcus, Vanessa's fiancé, squeezed her hand and smiled. Not a cruel smile exactly, just satisfied. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable for them, just for me. My name is Sophie Nate. I'm 32 years old. I work as a senior grant writer for a nonprofit in Portland, Oregon. I drove 4 hours to be here tonight. 4 hours through rain and early holiday traffic because I thought maybe this year would be different. Last night I made Grandma's sweet potato casserole from memory. The recipe she taught me when I was 9. The one with the pecans and the brown sugar crust that takes forever to get right. I thought maybe someone would notice. Maybe someone would say it tasted just like hers. Maybe that would be enough. I looked down at my untouched plate and felt something inside me go very still. This wasn't new. None of this was new. Vanessa has always been the golden child. 28 years old, beautiful in that effortless way that makes people want to be near her. She married young to a guy named Derek, divorced him dramatically 2 years later when she caught him texting his ex, and somehow came out of it looking like the victim everyone wanted to rescue. Now she's engaged to Marcus, who owns 3 luxury car dealerships and a waterfront condo in Seattle. My mother, Patricia, 61, has spent my entire life holding us up side by side like we're products on a shelf. Vanessa always got the better placement, the front-facing display, the special lighting. My father, Robert, 64, just watches. He's been watching my whole life, watching and saying nothing. Sometimes I think his silence hurts worse than my mother's comparisons. But tonight felt different. Maybe it was the way Vanessa smiled when she said it, like she'd been waiting all evening for the right moment to land that particular blow. Maybe it was the way Marcus backed her up without even knowing me. Or maybe it was my mother's quick subject change, moving on to talk about wedding venues before anyone could acknowledge what had just happened. Something crystallized in my chest, something cold and clear and sharp. I've sat at this table for 32 years, 32 Thanksgivings of being the disappointment, the one who didn't marry young enough, didn't marry rich enough, didn't marry at all, the one whose accomplishments never quite measured up because they didn't come with a ring or a +1 or a story my mother could brag about at her book club. I thought about all the times I'd driven home from these dinners crying, all the times I'd called my best friend Julia and asked her why I kept going back. All the times I'd promised myself I wouldn't let them make me feel small again. And here I was, small again. I looked around the table. My mother was laughing at something Marcus said about wedding photographers. Vanessa was glowing. My father was refilling his wine glass. Nobody was looking at me. I've spent my whole life waiting for them to see me. Really see me. Not the version of me they're disappointed in. Just me. The person who writes grants that fund after-school programs for kids who have nothing. The person who remembers everyone's birthday. The person who showed up tonight with Grandma's casserole, even though I knew it probably wouldn't matter. I wonder if anyone watching this scene would understand why I didn't just leave. Why I didn't stand up and walk out and never come back. Maybe some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. That hollow ache of being invisible in your own family, of loving people who can't quite see past their own narrative long enough to notice you're bleeding. If you've ever felt like the spare part in your own story, stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. I stopped waiting for permission to matter. And I think you'll want to see how this ends. If you're ready to watch someone finally choose themselves, hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to see what happens when the invisible one stops playing small. I pushed back from the table. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need to use the bathroom." Nobody looked up. I walked down the familiar hallway to the bathroom I'd used since childhood, locked the door, turned on the light, and looked at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked tired. 32 years of sad. But something else was there too. Something I hadn't seen before. I made a decision in that moment, standing alone in my parents' bathroom while my family laughed without me in the next room. I decided I was done. I walked back to the table and sat down. Nobody looked up. Vanessa was talking about the wedding venue, some vineyard in Napa with rolling hills and a stone terrace that overlooked the valley. She'd seen it on Instagram first, then convinced Marcus to fly down with her to see it in person. The ceremony site has these gorgeous oak trees, she said, her hands moving as she talked. And the reception hall has floor-to-ceiling windows. The sunset photos are going to be incredible. My mother leaned forward, completely absorbed. What about the guest list? Have you started on that yet? We're thinking around 200, Vanessa said. Intimate, but elegant, you know? Marcus nodded along, smiling. He seemed nice enough, the kind of man who'd learned to agree with whatever Vanessa wanted, because it was easier than having an opinion. I picked up my, fork. Put it down again. My father passed the green beans to Marcus without looking at me. My mother's whole body angled toward Vanessa like a plant growing toward light. Marcus glanced at me once, something uncomfortable crossing his face, then looked away. The sweet potato casserole I'd spent 2 hours making sat at the end of the table, nearly full. Vanessa's store-bought pumpkin pie was almost gone. This pie is amazing, Vanessa, my mother said. Where did you get it? That little bakery near Marcus's office. They do everything from scratch. I thought about my own life while they talked. My actual life, not the version of it that existed in this dining room. Last year, I secured over $3 million in grant funding for homeless youth programs in Portland. $3 million that built safe spaces for kids who had nowhere else to go. I wrote every application myself, researched every foundation, made every pitch. I live in a small apartment in the Pearl District. It's not big, but it's mine. I decorated it carefully. There are plants in every window, and books on every surface, and art I bought from local artists on the walls. I have friends who know me, really know me. Julia, who texts me every morning with coffee shop recommendations. David, who argues with me about science fiction novels. Rachel, who drags me to yoga classes I pretend to hate but actually love. I take pottery classes on Thursday evenings. I'm terrible at it, but the instructor says I'm improving. Last month I made a bowl that only wobbles a little. None of it matters here. None of it has ever mattered to them. I've tried different strategies over the years. Different versions of myself that might finally be enough. In high school, I focused on academics, while Vanessa focused on being popular. I graduated valedictorian, Vanessa barely passed. My mother threw Vanessa a bigger graduation party because she said Vanessa needed the confidence boost. In college, I worked 2 jobs to minimize student loans. I graduated with honors and debt I could actually manage. Vanessa dropped out after 1 semester to marry Derek. My parents paid for the wedding, $12,000 for a marriage that lasted 2 years. When I bought my first apartment at 27, my mother asked if I was lonely living alone. When Vanessa got divorced at 25, my parents welcomed her home and blamed Derek for everything. She lived with them for 8 months rent-free while she figured things out. I've been performing for an audience that will never applaud. I've been trying to win a game where the rules change specifically to ensure I lose. The recognition didn't hit me like lightning. It settled over me like fog. Quiet, cold, exhausting. After dinner, I started clearing plates. Nobody asked me to. Nobody ever asked me to. But I do it anyway because that's what I do. I make casseroles nobody eats, and clear plates nobody thanks me for clearing, and show up to dinners where nobody really wants me. I was carrying a stack of dishes toward the kitchen when I heard them, my mother and Vanessa. Their voices low, but not low enough. "Do you think Sophie will ever find someone?" my mother asked. I stopped walking. "I don't know, Mom," Vanessa said. "I think she's too picky and too focused on work. Honestly, I think she's given up." There was a pause, the sound of running water, a cabinet closing. "Maybe that's for the best," my mother said. "Some people just aren't meant for family life." I stood there in the dining room, holding plates that weren't mine, in a house that had never felt like home. They were talking about me like I was a problem to be solved, not a person to be known. Something shifted in my chest, something cold and clarifying. I set the plates down on the table, carefully, with complete control. Then I walked to the front door, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside into the November darkness. The air was sharp and clean. I could see my breath. I stood on the porch for a long time, looking at the street I'd grown up on. The same trees, the same houses, everything exactly as it had always been. Except me. I wasn't the same. I pulled out my phone. My hands were steady. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I was done. Done performing, done apologizing, done showing up to dinners where I'd never be welcome. The porch light flickered on behind me. My father opened the door. "Sophie, you okay?" I looked at him, really looked at him. "I'm fine," I said. He nodded, started to close the door. "Dad?" He paused. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" He knew what I meant. I could see it in his face. "It's complicated, Sophie." "No," I said quietly. "It's really not." He stood there for a moment. Then he went back inside without another word. I waited until the door clicked shut. Then I walked to my car, got in, and drove away. I didn't look back. I didn't say goodbye. I just collected my coat from the hall closet, walked to my car, and left. They were probably still in the kitchen. Probably didn't notice I was gone for another 20 minutes. The highway stretched out dark and empty ahead of me. 4 hours back to Portland. 4 hours of silence. I didn't turn on music, didn't turn on a podcast. I just drove and let myself think, really think. The headlights of passing cars swept across my windshield in rhythm. On and off, light and dark, each mile putting distance between me and that house. I thought about my college graduation. I'd worked so hard for that degree. Double major in English and nonprofit management. I graduated summa cum laude. My parents came to the ceremony but left right after to make it to Vanessa's birthday dinner across town. She was turning 20. It was at some restaurant she liked. They said they'd celebrate with me later. We never did. I thought about the time I had appendicitis when I was 26. Emergency surgery. I was in the hospital for 3 days. My mother visited once. She stayed maybe 40 minutes. Complained about how expensive the parking was. Said she couldn't stay long because she was helping Vanessa move into her new apartment after the divorce. Vanessa lived 10 minutes from our parents. I lived 4 hours away. I thought about last Christmas. I'd spent weeks finding the perfect gifts for everyone. A first edition book for my father because he'd mentioned loving it as a kid. A cashmere scarf for my mother in the exact shade of blue she always wore. For Vanessa, a piece of jewelry from a designer she'd been following on Instagram. They got me a candle set, the kind you buy in bulk at discount stores. 3 candles, pine, vanilla, and something called winterberry. My mother said, "We figured you'd like candles since you're home alone so much." The pattern has always been there, visible to anyone who cared to look. But I've spent 32 years making excuses for them, reframing their neglect as my failure, telling myself if I just tried harder, achieved more, needed less, they'd finally see me. I passed a rest stop but didn't pull over. I wanted to keep moving. I thought about my romantic history. 3 serious relationships. Michael in my mid-20s. He was a lawyer who worked 80-hour weeks and told me I was too needy when I asked to see him more than once a week. David, after that. A photographer who said he needed space to create and disappeared for days without calling. Then James, who was kind but distant, who never quite let me in, who ended things by saying he didn't think he could give me what I needed. I'd blamed myself each time. Thought I was asking for too much. Thought I needed to be more independent, less emotional, easier to love. But I see it now. I chose men who were emotionally unavailable. Men who kept me at arm's length. Men who made me work constantly to prove my worth. I've been recreating my family dynamic over and over, seeking the same conditional love, the same moving goalposts, the same exhausting performance of trying to be enough. The highway curved through dark hills. My headlights caught the reflective eyes of a deer standing at the tree line. Then it was gone. Something broke tonight. Not me. The illusion. I've been operating under a belief that if I just achieved enough, behaved well enough, needed little enough, they would eventually see my value. I've been waiting for them to change, while I contorted myself into smaller and smaller spaces. That belief shattered tonight in my parents' kitchen, while I listened to my mother and sister discuss me like a problem with no solution. And in its absence, I felt something unexpected. Not grief, relief. The relief of finally stopping a race I was never going to win. By the time I reached Portland, it was past midnight. I parked in my building's garage and sat in the darkness. Engine off, keys in my lap. The silence felt different than it had 4 hours. Ego. Cleaner somehow. I thought about what comes next. I could continue as before. Keep attending holidays. Keep accepting crumbs. Keep pretending the dynamic doesn't devastate me. Or I could do something different. Something that honors the truth I'm finally admitting. I pulled out my phone. The screen was bright in the darkness. I opened the family group chat. The last message was from Vanessa 3 days ago. A photo of her engagement ring from a different angle. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could say nothing. I could let tonight fade into the background like every other holiday. I could show up at Christmas and pretend everything was fine, or I could tell the truth. I started typing. The message was only 7 words long, but those 7 words would change everything. I read them twice. Then I hit send. I won't be coming to Christmas. I sent the message and turned off my phone. 7 words. I won't be attending Christmas this year. No explanation, no apology, no excuse about work or travel plans. Just the truth. Then I went to bed. The next morning I woke up and made coffee, showered, got dressed for work. Only then did I turn my phone back on. 43 missed calls, 67 text messages. I sat at my kitchen table and started reading. My mother's messages came in waves. The first one was sent at 6 in the morning. Sophie, are you feeling all right? Please call me. By the fifth message, the tone had shifted. I don't understand why you're being so selfish. This is a family holiday. By the 10th message, she was angry. You're tearing this family apart over nothing. I've always done my best as a mother, and this is how you repay me? The words came through clearly, even in text form. I was being dramatic, oversensitive, ungrateful. How dare I upset everyone like this? Especially during Vanessa's engagement, especially when my mother had sacrificed so much. Vanessa's messages were fewer, but sharper. This is so petty, Sophie. You're just jealous because I'm happy. You're trying to steal attention from my wedding. Grow up. Honestly, you need to talk to someone professional. This isn't normal behavior. The subtext wasn't even subtle. My feelings weren't valid. My boundaries weren't reasonable. My attempt to protect myself was actually an attack on them. My father sent only 2 messages. Please don't do this. And 3 hours later, your mother is very upset. Neither message asked why I'd made this decision. Neither message acknowledged that I might be upset too. His response was perhaps the most painful because it was so perfectly him, prioritizing my mother's emotions, ignoring mine. I read through every message while my coffee went cold, and I noticed something crucial. Not one person asked why. Not one person expressed curiosity about my emotional state. Not one person suggested they might have done something to hurt me. The entire family response was focused on how my boundary affected them, inconvenienced them, upset their plans. I got ready for work and drove to the office. The day moved around me with strange clarity. I attended meetings, responded to emails, reviewed 3 grant applications for a youth mentorship program. Everything felt sharper somehow, more real. My colleague Maya stopped by my desk around lunch. You okay? She asked. You seem different. I looked up at her. Maya and I have worked together for 4 years. She knows me better than my family ever has. Can we get coffee? I asked. We went to the cafe down the street, sat by the window, and I told her everything. Not just about Thanksgiving, about the entire pattern, the lifetime of neglect, the decision I'd made. Maya listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm proud of you. 4 words. They hit me with unexpected force. I realized I'd been waiting 3 decades for my family to say something like that, to acknowledge my worth, to be proud of who I am. And they never will. But other people can. Other people do. I've been so focused on the love I couldn't earn that I've undervalued the love I already have. That evening, I sat down at my laptop and crafted a longer response to my family. I wrote several versions, deleted them, started over. Finally, I settled on something clear and calm. I understand this is unexpected, and I'm not trying to hurt anyone, but I need distance from family dynamics that have been painful for me for a long time. I'm open to rebuilding relationships that feel mutual and respectful, but I won't continue participating in patterns that diminish me. I hope you can understand. I read it 3 times. Then I sent it. And then I did something I'd never done before. I muted the family group chat. Not blocked, just muted. I didn't need to see their responses in real time. Didn't need to feel the weight of their anger or guilt or manipulation as it arrived. I could check when I was ready, if I was ready. 3 days passed, 3 days of relative peace. I didn't check the muted messages. I focused on work, had dinner with Julia, went to my Thursday pottery class, and actually made something that didn't collapse. I was beginning to feel lighter, more myself, like I'd been holding my breath for 32 years and finally exhaled. Wednesday evening, I was making dinner in my apartment. Pasta with the good olive oil, a salad, simple and quiet. The buzzer rang at 8 o'clock. I wasn't expecting anyone. I walked to the intercom and checked the video screen. My mother stood in the lobby. Her coat was buttoned against the December cold. Her finger was pressed insistently on the buzzer. She looked up at the camera, and I knew she wasn't leaving until I let her in. I stared at the intercom screen. My mother's face was twisted in impatient determination. She pressed the buzzer again, longer this time. I could see her mouth moving, probably calling my name. For 30 seconds, I considered not answering. I could pretend I wasn't home. I could let her stand in the cold until she gave up and left. But I recognized this moment for what it was, a test of my new boundaries. If I hid, I was still letting them control my behavior. If I engaged on my terms, calm and clear, I was proving to myself that I'd changed. I pressed the intercom button. "Mom, I didn't invite you here." Her face shifted through surprise to relief to indignation in rapid succession. "Sophie, we need to talk. Let me up." "No." The word felt foreign in my mouth, directed at her. "If you want to talk, we can schedule a phone call later this week." "I drove 2 hours to see you." Her voice carried that familiar edge of martyrdom, the implication that her effort obligated my compliance. "I'm not having this conversation through a speaker box. Let me up right now." I took a breath, steadying myself. "I'm not available tonight. If you'd like to talk, you can call me Saturday afternoon. Otherwise, you should head home before it gets too late." "Sophie Marie Nate, you open this door immediately." Her voice rose, echoing in the lobby. "I am your mother, and I will not be dismissed like this." "You're right that you're my mother," I said. My voice stayed calm despite my racing heart. "But I'm an adult with my own home, and you came here without asking if it was convenient. I'm setting a boundary. Saturday afternoon we can talk on the phone." Her expression transformed into something I'd seen countless times, wounded disbelief that I would dare prioritize my own needs. "I cannot believe how selfish you've become. Your sister was right about you. You've changed into someone I don't even recognize. Maybe you never really knew me to begin with." I said it quietly. Then I ended the intercom call. I watched through the screen as she stood in the lobby. 3 minutes, alternating between pressing the buzzer and calling my phone. I turned my phone to silent. I only saw the screen lighting up repeatedly with "Mom" flashing across it. Finally, she turned and walked out of the building. Her posture radiated offended fury. My hands were shaking. I sat on my couch trying to process what had just happened. I just turned my mother away. I'd enforced a boundary even when she tried every familiar manipulation. Guilt, anger, the invocation of maternal authority, and I'd held firm. The validation didn't come from her acceptance. Patricia would probably never accept this. It came from my own sense of self-respect. I didn't yell. I didn't justify or over-explain. I simply stated what I needed and held that line. Maya called 20 minutes later. I told her what happened. "You're a badass," she said immediately. "How do you feel?" "Terrified," I admitted, "and also kind of powerful." "That's exactly right," Maya said. "That's what self-respect feels like when you're not used to it." That night, I allowed myself to check the muted family chat. The messages had multiplied. Patricia had told the family about my appalling behavior. She'd painted herself as a concerned mother who was cruelly rejected. Vanessa had added her commentary, calling me unhinged and suggesting I was having a breakdown. Several extended family members had chimed in with variations of "family is everything" and "your mother loves you." I noticed what was missing from all these messages: any acknowledgement of why I might need boundaries, any curiosity about my perspective, any willingness to examine their own behavior. They'd cast me as the villain in a story where I was simply trying to protect myself. I closed the chat and stared at my ceiling, thinking about how families can love you and hurt you simultaneously, how they can claim to want your presence while making that presence conditional on your silence. I wondered if other people had experienced this. The moment when you realize that keeping the peace has required you to stay in pieces. Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and your own dignity? Have you ever been made to feel selfish for simply asking to be seen? Sometimes I think the hardest part isn't the boundary itself. It's the realization that the people who should understand are the ones who refuse to try. I turned off the light and tried to sleep, but my mind kept circling back to that intercom screen. My mother's face, the way she'd looked at me like I was a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe the version of me she wanted had never really existed. The next morning, I woke to an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "About your family situation. You need to know this." My finger hovered over the delete button. Probably spam. Probably someone who'd somehow gotten my email through work. But something made me pause. Something made me open it instead. The email was short, 3 paragraphs, no signature, and as I read it, my coffee went cold in my hands. Because the person writing knew things about my family that I'd never told anyone outside my closest friends. They knew about Thanksgiving dinner. They knew about my mother's visit last night. They knew details that should have been private. And they were offering to tell me something about Vanessa, something they said I deserved to know, something about her engagement to Marcus. The email ended with a single line. "If you want the truth, reply to this message. If not, delete it and pretend you never saw it. Either way, I thought you should have the choice." I sat there for a long time, staring at those words, wondering who'd sent this, wondering what they knew, wondering if I really wanted to find out. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. "Coffee this morning?" I looked back at the email. Then I hit reply and typed 2 words. "Tell me." The response came within an hour. The email was from someone named Jennifer Caldwell. I didn't immediately recognize the name. She explained that she was married to my mother's younger brother, making her my aunt by marriage. We'd only met a handful of times at large family gatherings, weddings, funerals, the kind of events where you exchange pleasantries and forget each other's names. Jennifer wrote that she'd been watching my situation unfold through family conversations. She felt compelled to reach out privately. What she revealed shifted my understanding of everything. Jennifer explained that my mother has always been intensely competitive with her own siblings, particularly her sister Linda, and that this competitiveness extended to their children. Linda's daughter, my cousin Emma, was academically gifted and professionally successful. Much like me, my mother couldn't bear the comparison, so she poured all her praise and attention into Vanessa. Vanessa represented a different kind of success, one that didn't trigger my mother's insecurity. Jennifer wrote that she'd watched my mother systematically diminish my accomplishments for years while elevating Vanessa's, and that it had nothing to do with my actual worth. It was about my mother's own psychological needs, her own wounds, her own inability to celebrate a daughter who reminded her of the sister she'd envied for decades. The email included specific examples Jennifer had witnessed. A family gathering where my mother changed the subject every time someone mentioned my career success. A Christmas where my mother forgot to display my college graduation photo, but had multiple framed pictures of Vanessa's wedding. A conversation where my mother told Jennifer that I was too much like Linda's daughter, and it exhausted her. Jennifer apologized for not speaking up sooner. She explained that she'd maintained a distant relationship with my mother's side of the family precisely because of dynamics like this, but she felt I deserved to know the truth. She ended the email by saying that my decision to create distance was not only justified but necessary for my well-being. I read the email 3 times. Each reading brought a different wave of emotion. First came validation, confirmation that I wasn't crazy, not oversensitive, not imagining the pattern. Second came grief, mourning for the mother-daughter relationship I'd never have, not because of anything I'd done wrong, but because of wounds my mother carried that I couldn't heal. Third came anger, clean, clarifying anger at the years I'd spent trying to fix something that was never my responsibility to fix. I responded to Jennifer, thanking her for the information, asking if we could talk further. She called that evening. We spoke for over an hour. Jennifer shared more observations, more context, more pieces of the puzzle that helped me understand my family's dynamics. She also shared something crucial. Emma, my cousin, had gone through a similar experience with her own mother's favoritism toward Emma's brother. Emma eventually created firm boundaries, and while the family relationships never became warm, they became manageable and no longer toxic. The thing about families like ours, Jennifer said carefully, is that they require someone to play the scapegoat role. Someone has to be the problem, so everyone else can avoid looking at the real problems. You've been playing that role your whole life, and now you're refusing to play it anymore. They're going to escalate before they accept it. How much worse does it get? I asked. That depends on how firm your boundaries are, Jennifer responded. If you hold steady, they'll eventually realize they can't manipulate you back into the old pattern, but it gets uncomfortable first. I thought about that after we hung up. Uncomfortable first. I was already uncomfortable, but at least now I understood why. Jennifer's warning proved prophetic faster than I expected. That weekend, I received a call from Vanessa. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Sophie? Her voice was different than usual, softer, almost vulnerable. Yeah. Can we talk? Just the two of us, without Mom involved? I paused. This was new. Vanessa had never asked to talk to me privately, never suggested leaving our mother out of anything. About what? About everything, she said. I think we need to clear the air, sister to sister. Something in her tone made me cautious, but I was also curious about this unexpected shift. Okay, I said. When? Tuesday, coffee? That place near your office you used to mention. She remembered where I worked. That was surprising too. All right, Tuesday at 10. Thank you, Sophie. Really, I think this will help. We hung up. I sat there holding my phone, trying to parse what had just happened. Then I opened Instagram. Force of habit. Vanessa's last active status showed her location, our parents' house, posted 15 minutes before she called me. I stared at that location tag for a long time. The vulnerable sister act might be exactly that. An act, coordinated and strategic. I thought about canceling, about texting her that I'd changed my mind. But another part of me wanted to see what this was, wanted to know what they'd planned, what angle they were working. Because if Jennifer was right, if they needed me to play the scapegoat role, they weren't going to let me walk away without a fight. And Vanessa calling me, using that soft voice, suggesting we talk sister to sister while she was literally at our mother's house? That wasn't reconciliation. That was strategy. I texted Maya. Vanessa wants to meet Tuesday. Pretty sure it's a setup. She responded immediately. Want me to come with? Sit at another table as backup? I smiled, despite myself. Maybe. Let me think about it. Either way, record the conversation on your phone. Trust me on this. I looked at her message for a long time. Then I typed back. Good idea. Tuesday felt very far away. And also much too soon. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. I chose a table near the window with clear sight lines to the entrance. I'd learned something in recent weeks. Trust needs to be earned back, not freely given. Vanessa walked in 12 minutes late. She was dressed carefully. Not her usual polished perfection, but something more casual, more relatable. It was a costume, I realized, chosen to convey humility. She ordered an elaborate latte and settled across from me with a heavy sigh. "I'm glad you agreed to meet. I wasn't sure you would." "I'm curious what you want to say," I responded, my tone neutral. Vanessa fidgeted with her cup, a gesture I'd never seen from her usually confident self. "I want to apologize for Thanksgiving, for the things I said. I was out of line." I waited, said nothing. I'd learned that silence makes people reveal more than questions do. "I think," Vanessa continued, "I think maybe I've been taking my stress out on you. Wedding planning is overwhelming, and Marcus has been working so much, and Mom has all these opinions about everything. I shouldn't have made that comment about you being single. It was cruel." The apology sounded rehearsed. I recognized the cadence, the careful word choices. "Did Mom tell you to say this?" Vanessa's expression flickered, irritation breaking through the humble facade. "Why does everything have to be about Mom?" "I'm trying to apologize here." "You're apologizing for one comment at one dinner," I said calmly. "I'm talking about a pattern that's existed our entire lives. I'm talking about the fact that you've watched Mom treat me like an afterthought for 32 years, and you've never once defended me. You've benefited from that dynamic, and you've reinforced it." "That's not fair." Her voice sharpened. "I can't control how Mom treats you." "No, but you could have chosen not to participate in it. You could have chosen not to mock me, not to compete with me, not to treat my accomplishments like they're less important than yours." I kept my voice level, factual. "You could have been my sister instead of Mom's ally." Vanessa's carefully constructed vulnerability crumbled. "You know what your problem is, Sophie? You're jealous. You always have been. You can't stand that I'm happy, that I have Marcus, that I'm getting married. You want everyone to be as miserable and alone as you are." There it was, the real Vanessa, the script I'd heard in various forms my entire life. But this time, instead of feeling wounded, I felt detached. I was watching a performance I no longer believed in. "I'm not jealous of you, Vanessa," I said quietly. "I actually feel sorry for you." "Sorry for me?" She laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "I'm engaged to a successful man. I'm planning my dream wedding. I have Mom and Dad's support. What exactly are you sorry about?" "I'm sorry that you've built your entire identity on being better than me. I'm sorry that you need Mom's approval so desperately that you'll throw me under the bus to get it. I'm sorry that you're 28 years old and you still don't know who you are outside of being the favorite daughter." I stood, gathered my coat. "I'm sorry that when I stop playing my role in this family drama, your role stops making sense too." Vanessa's face flushed red. "You're delusional. You think you're so much better than us because you have your little nonprofit job and your little apartment. You think you're taking some moral high ground. But you're just alone, Sophie. You're going to end up alone because you push everyone away." "I'd rather be alone than diminished," I said. "I'd rather have no family than a family that requires me to be small so they can feel big." I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. My hands were steady. My breathing was calm. I wasn't running away. I was walking towards something better. That evening, I received a series of texts from my mother. Vanessa had reported back, painting me as hostile and unreasonable. My mother demanded I apologize to my sister immediately. The texts escalated in urgency and anger when I didn't respond within the hour. "How dare you treat your sister that way? She was trying to extend an olive branch. You're tearing this family apart. Call me right now." I read each one with a strange sense of distance, like I was reading about someone else's family, someone else's drama. Then I blocked my mother's number. Then I blocked Vanessa's. I kept my father's contact active, but muted it. I wasn't interested in defending myself anymore. Wasn't interested in explaining myself to people who were determined to misunderstand me. Maya called that night. "How did it go?" "Exactly like we expected," I said. She tried to apologize for one comment while ignoring 32 years of patterns. Then she called me jealous and alone when I didn't accept it. Did you record it? I did, but I don't think I'll need it. I'm not trying to prove anything to them anymore. Good, Maya said. That's growth. 2 weeks passed in blessed quiet. I focused on work, deepened friendships, started therapy to process my family trauma. My therapist, Dr. Chen, was in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner I appreciated. You're grieving, she told me in our second session. Not for the family you had, but for the family you deserved and never got. That's a real loss. I cried in her office. Not dramatic sobs, but quiet tears that felt like release. I was beginning to feel genuinely peaceful. My apartment felt lighter. My days felt more mine. I was sleeping better than I had in years. Then the wedding invitation arrived in the mail. Thick cream cardstock, expensive printing. Vanessa's wedding, 6 months away. I almost threw it in the recycling without opening the envelope. But something made me look inside. Enclosed with the formal invitation was a handwritten note from my mother. The handwriting was careful, controlled. Sophie, I know things have been difficult lately, but family is family. It would break your father's heart if you didn't attend Vanessa's wedding. Whatever issues you think you have with us, please don't punish your sister on her special day. She wants you there. We all do. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. Each sentence was a manipulation. Family is family. Translation. Your boundaries don't matter. It would break your father's heart. Translation. I'm using Dad's emotions to control you. Whatever issues you think you have. Translation. Your feelings aren't real. Don't punish your sister. Translation. Setting boundaries is an attack. She wants you there. We all do. Translation. We need you to play your role. I set the invitation on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time. 6 months away. 6 months to decide if I was really done, or if I'd let them pull me back in one more time. I brought the wedding invitation to my third therapy session with Dr. Rachel Morrison. She specialized in family systems and trauma. Maya had recommended her. Dr. Morrison examined the invitation and the note. Then she looked at me with practiced neutrality. How does receiving this make you feel? Manipulated, I answered immediately. The note doesn't say it would break Vanessa's heart, or even Mom's heart. It says Dad's heart. She's using the one family member I still have some emotional connection with as leverage. Dr. Morrison nodded. What do you notice about that strategy? I thought for a moment. She knows I've blocked her and Vanessa. She knows direct appeals won't work. So she's triangulating through Dad, using his emotions as a weapon, even though Dad hasn't reached out to me himself about any of this. Triangulation is common in dysfunctional family systems, Dr. Morrison explained. One person uses a third party to communicate or manipulate, avoiding direct confrontation while still attempting to control the situation. It keeps everyone off balance and prevents clear, honest communication. The session explored my relationship with my father more deeply. I described Robert as a passive presence throughout my childhood, not actively cruel like my mother, not actively competitive like Vanessa, but absent in the ways that mattered most. He never protected me from my mother's favoritism. He never called out Vanessa's cruelty. He witnessed everything and did nothing. And his inaction was its own form of betrayal. There's a concept in family therapy called the enabler, Dr. Morrison said. The enabler isn't the primary aggressor, but they allow the aggression to continue through their silence. They prioritize peace over justice, comfort over truth. Your father's passivity enabled your mother's favoritism and your sister's cruelty. Something cracked open in my chest. Recognition, grief, anger all mixed together. He let it happen, I said. All of it. He watched me try so hard to be good enough, and he never once told me I already was. And now your mother is using him as an emotional shield, Dr. Morrison continued. She's betting that your residual love for your father will override your boundaries. She's betting that you'll sacrifice your well-being to spare him discomfort. But if I go to that wedding, I trailed off, seeing the trap clearly now. If you go, you're teaching them that your boundaries are negotiable. You're showing them that the right emotional leverage will make you fold, and you'll spend an entire day surrounded by people who've hurt you, watching them celebrate while they pretend the hurt never happened. I sat with this truth. I thought about the version of myself who would have received this invitation 6 months ago. The Sophie who would have immediately RSVP'd yes, who would have bought an expensive gift, who would have smiled through the entire event while dying inside. That Sophie would have attended out of obligation, out of hope that maybe this time they'd appreciate her presence, out of fear that not attending would make her the bad guy. But I wasn't that person anymore. I'd spent the past 2 months learning to trust my own perception, to honor my own feelings, to recognize that I wasn't responsible for other people's emotions. The wedding invitation wasn't really an invitation, it was a test. It was my family asking if I was serious about my boundaries or if they were just temporary theatrics. Dr. Morrison asked the crucial question, "What do you want to do?" I realized I already knew. I want to decline. I want to send a polite response saying I won't be attending, and then I want to move on with my life. I don't want to explain or justify. I don't want to leave the door open for negotiation. I just want to say no. That sounds like self-respect, Dr. Morrison said with a slight smile. That evening I wrote my response. It took multiple drafts. I kept wanting to explain, to soften it, to leave room for them to understand. But Dr. Morrison's words echoed in my head. Clear, honest communication. Finally, I settled on something simple. Thank you for the invitation. I won't be able to attend. I wish you both well. I addressed it to Vanessa and Marcus, not including any message for my parents. I mailed it the next morning. Then I went to work and tried not to think about it. Maya took me out for dinner that night. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "Scared," I admitted. And also relieved. And also like I'm waiting for something terrible to happen. "That's normal," she said. "You just drew a line they've never seen you draw before. They're going to react." "I know. But you're ready." I looked at her. My friend who'd seen me through all of this, who'd never once told me I was overreacting or that family was family or that I should just forgive and forget. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." 3 days later, my father called. It was the first time he'd reached out directly since Thanksgiving. I was at my desk at work when my phone buzzed. His name appeared on the screen. Dad. My thumb hovered over the answer button. I knew this conversation would reveal something important, whether Robert was capable of being the father I needed, or if he was simply another messenger for my mother's manipulation. I thought about letting it go to voicemail, but I'd spent my whole life avoiding confrontation with him, accepting his silence, making excuses for his passivity. Maybe it was time to hear what he had to say. I stepped into an empty conference room and answered. "Hi, Dad." "Sophie." His voice sounded tired. "We need to talk about the wedding." Not "how are you," not "I've missed you," not "I'm sorry for everything," just the wedding. "Okay," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Your mother is very upset that you declined. Vanessa is hurt. This is a family event, Sophie. You should be there." I closed my eyes. There it was. The same script, the same priorities. Their feelings mattered. Mine didn't. "Dad," I sent a polite response. "I'm not attending. That's my decision." "You're being selfish," he said, quiet but firm. "You're punishing your sister for whatever problems you think you have with your mother." "I don't think I have problems with Mom," I said. "I know I do, and you've watched those problems exist for 32 years without saying a word." Silence on the other end. "Why didn't you ever defend me?" I asked. The question I'd never asked out loud. "Sophie, this isn't about the past. This is about your sister's wedding." "No, Dad, this is about the past. This is about every time you stood by and watched Mom treat me like I didn't matter. Every time you heard Vanessa mock me and said nothing. Every time you chose peace over protecting me." "I did my best," he said. And I realized that might actually be true, that his best had simply never been enough. "I'm not coming to the wedding," I said, "and I need you to respect that. Your mother won't accept this. That's not my problem anymore." I heard him take a breath. Sophie, please. Goodbye, Dad. I hung up before he could say anything else. My hands were shaking, but I'd done it. I'd said no to my father, and I was still standing. I answered on the fourth ring. Hi, Dad. Sophie. His voice sounded tired, older than I remembered. I got your RSVP, or rather, your mother showed it to me. I figured she would. There was a long pause. I didn't fill it. I'd learned that silence is a tool, that people reveal themselves when they're uncomfortable enough. Your mother is very upset, Robert finally said. She thinks you're trying to ruin Vanessa's wedding. Is that what you think? Another pause. I think things have gotten out of hand. I think this family is falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it. It's been falling apart for a long time, Dad. You're just noticing now because I stopped pretending. It was fine. That's not fair, Sophie. His voice carried a hint of defensiveness. I've always tried to keep the peace. I've always tried to keep this family together. By keeping quiet while Mom made me feel worthless. The words came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften them. By saying nothing while Vanessa mocked me, by prioritizing everyone's comfort except mine, I never wanted you to feel worthless. Robert sounded genuinely pained. I love you, Sophie. You're my daughter. Then why didn't you ever defend me? My voice cracked slightly. Why didn't you ever tell Mom to stop comparing us? Why didn't you ever tell Vanessa her comments were cruel? Why did you just sit there year after year watching me try so hard to earn love I should have had automatically? The silence that followed was different, heavier, more honest. When Robert spoke again, his voice was quieter. I don't know. I told myself I was staying neutral, not taking sides. But you're right. Silence isn't neutral. It's a choice, and I chose wrong. I felt tears building, but kept my voice steady. I needed a father who would protect me. I needed someone in that family to see me, really see me, and tell me I was enough exactly as I was. You never did that. I know. His admission was barely above a whisper. I was a coward, Sophie. Your mother has always been forceful. It was easier to go along than to push back. And Vanessa was always so much like your mother, and you were always so independent, so capable. I told myself you didn't need me the way Vanessa needed attention. I needed you differently, I said. I needed you to notice that I was capable because I had to be, not because I wanted to be. I needed you to see that independence was a survival strategy, not a personality trait. I see it now, Robert said, and he sounded genuinely broken. I see a lot of things now. Watching you pull away has made me look at our family differently, and I don't like what I see. But Sophie, you're my daughter. I don't want to lose you. I'm not trying to punish you, Dad. I'm trying to protect myself. I wiped my eyes. I can't keep participating in family dynamics that hurt me. I can't keep showing up to events where I'm treated like an obligation instead of a person. I can't keep hoping that someday you'll all suddenly value me. So what does that mean? You're just done with all of us? I'm done with the way things have been, I clarified. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be different. It has to be direct, just you and me, not filtered through Mom's needs or Vanessa's drama. It has to involve you actually showing up for me, not just asking me to show up for everyone else. Robert was quiet for a long moment. What would that look like? It would look like you calling me sometimes just to talk, not just when there's a family crisis. It would look like you acknowledging the ways I've been hurt instead of asking me to get over it. For the sake of peace, it would look like you having my back even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means disagreeing with Mom or Vanessa. I don't know if I can do that, Robert admitted. Your mother and I have been married 40 years. I can't just... I'm not asking you to divorce Mom, I interrupted. I'm asking you to be my father. Those things aren't mutually exclusive unless you make them mutually exclusive. He was quiet again. I need to think about this, he finally said. That's fine, I told him, but my boundaries aren't changing while you think. We hung up shortly after. I sat there holding my phone, feeling the weight of that conversation settle over me. The complexity of loving someone who hurt you through inaction, of wanting a relationship with someone who's never fully shown up for you. Is it possible to rebuild something that was never properly built in the first place? Or am I just setting myself up for more disappointment? I didn't know the answer, but I knew I couldn't go back to the way things were. 2 months passed. Robert called occasionally. Awkward conversations about weather and work. He asked about my job, told me about a book he was reading, never touched the deeper issues. I maintained my boundaries, declined additional wedding-related events, continued building my life in Portland. I spent more time with friends, took a weekend trip to the coast with Maya, started dating someone I met at a work conference, though it was still new and tentative. I was beginning to feel like myself, not the daughter who was never enough, just Sophie, 32 years old, figuring out who I was when I wasn't performing for an audience that would never applaud. Then 1 week before Vanessa's wedding, I received a certified letter. It came to my apartment, required a signature. The return address was a law office I didn't recognize. I opened it standing in my kitchen. Inside was a legal document, multiple pages, official letterhead, Patricia Nate versus Sophie Marie Nate. My mother was suing me for emotional distress and defamation of character. I read through the complaint with growing disbelief. It claimed I'd made false and malicious statements about my mother to extended family members, that I'd intentionally caused her psychological harm, that my refusal to attend family events constituted harassment and emotional abuse. The damages requested were $50,000. I sat down at my kitchen table. My hands were shaking. My mother was suing me for setting boundaries, for protecting myself, for telling the truth about my own experiences. She was taking me to court because I'd said no. I called Maya. She did what? Maya's voice was sharp with disbelief. She's suing me for emotional distress, for talking to Aunt Jennifer, for not coming to Christmas or the wedding. That's insane. Can she even do that? Apparently, she can file it. Whether it goes anywhere is another question. You need a lawyer. I know. I hung up and immediately called the lawyer Maya recommended, left a message, sent the scanned documents by email. Then I just sat there, staring at the papers, thinking about how far my mother was willing to go to punish me for choosing myself, how much she needed me to play my role, that she'd weaponized the legal system to force me back into it. And I realized something. This wasn't about the wedding. This wasn't about Christmas. This wasn't even about me. This was about my mother's desperate need to control the narrative, to be the victim, to make sure that if anyone was going to be cast as the villain, it would be me. She'd rather destroy me than examine herself. And that told me everything I needed to know about whether reconciliation was possible. I read the legal document 3 times. Each reading brought a new wave of disbelief. The lawsuit alleged that I'd spread false and damaging information about my mother to family members, that I'd caused her severe emotional distress, that I'd damaged her reputation and created family discord. The document demanded I issue a public apology, attend family therapy sessions paid for by me, and compensate my mother for emotional damages in the amount of $15,000. I knew enough to recognize that the lawsuit was legally absurd. I hadn't spread any information. I'd simply set boundaries and declined to attend events. I hadn't contacted extended family members to complain. I'd barely spoken to anyone except Jennifer. The claims were baseless, designed to intimidate rather than succeed in court. But that was exactly the point. My mother wasn't trying to win a lawsuit. She was trying to force me back into compliance through fear and financial pressure. She was betting that I'd cave rather than deal with the stress and expense of legal defense. She was using the legal system as another manipulation tool, escalating her tactics because the emotional manipulation had failed. I called Jennifer. She listened to the details and then laughed, not with humor, but with bitter recognition. Of course she did. When people like Patricia lose control, they escalate. They can't accept that someone is walking away, so they try to make walking away more painful than staying. What do? I asked. You get a lawyer, you respond formally, and you don't engage emotionally, Jennifer advised. This lawsuit won't go anywhere, but you need to take it seriously enough to protect yourself. Document everything. Save every text, every email, every voicemail. Let your lawyer handle the response. I followed her advice. I found a lawyer through a friend's recommendation, a woman named Diane Chen, who specialized in family law and had seen cases like this before. Diane reviewed the documents and confirmed they were legally frivolous but strategically malicious. Your mother is trying to punish you for setting boundaries, Diane explained. The good news is that her claims are unfounded and easily disproven. The bad news is that responding will cost you time and money, which is exactly what she wants. She wants you to feel like maintaining your boundaries is too expensive, too exhausting, too painful. So she wins either way? I asked. Only if you let her, Diane responded. If you respond appropriately, document everything, and maintain your boundaries regardless of her escalation, you show her that this tactic won't work either. You also create a legal record of her harassment, which could be useful if she continues escalating. Diane drafted a formal response denying all claims and demanding dismissal of the lawsuit. She included documentation showing that I'd had minimal contact with family members and had made no defamatory statements. The response was professional, thorough, completely unemotional, exactly what was needed. I also did something else. I reached out to Emma, my cousin, the one Jennifer mentioned who went through similar family dynamics. Emma responded within hours. We arranged a video call. She was 36, a neuroscientist living in Boston. She spoke with the calm authority of someone who'd survived what I was currently experiencing. My mother tried something similar, Emma shared. Not a lawsuit, but she convinced half the family I was having a mental breakdown and needed intervention. She organized an actual intervention where everyone showed up to my apartment uninvited to tell me I was destroying the family by setting boundaries. What did you do? I asked. I documented everything. I maintained my boundaries, and I waited. It took about 6 months, but eventually the family realized I wasn't going to engage with the drama. Some of them apologized. Most of them just moved on to other topics. My mother still doesn't speak to me, and honestly, that's fine. I have a good life without her toxicity in it. Emma's story provided me with something crucial. Proof that survival was possible, that maintaining boundaries worked, that the temporary escalation eventually subsided when the person realized their tactics weren't succeeding. The thing about people like our mothers, Emma said, is that they need an audience. They need someone to perform for, someone to control, someone to react. When you stop reacting, when you stop being available for their drama, they eventually move on to someone else, or they just stew in their own bitterness. Either way, you're free. I thought about that word, free. I wanted to believe it was possible. We talked for over an hour. Emma shared strategies that had worked for her, boundaries she'd set, ways she'd rebuilt her life without her family's approval. By the time we hung up, I felt steadier, less alone. 3 days before Vanessa's wedding, the lawsuit was formally dismissed. Lack of merit, the notification said. I received it at work, read it twice to make sure I understood correctly. Then I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. She'd tried to intimidate me through the legal system, and it hadn't worked. The court had seen through it, dismissed it, validated that I wasn't the problem. That evening, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. You think you've won, you haven't. We'll see how smug you are when you're alone for the rest of your life. I knew immediately who sent it. My mother, using a different phone. I stared at that message for a long time, and I realized something. Instead of feeling threatened, I felt something else entirely. Pity. Pity for a woman so desperate for control that she'd destroyed her relationship with her daughter rather than admit she was wrong. Pity for someone who'd rather send threatening texts from burner phones than examine her own behavior. Pity for a person who equated being alone with being unloved, who couldn't imagine that someone might choose solitude over toxicity and call it peace. I didn't respond to the text. I didn't block the number. I just set my phone down and went back to making dinner. Because that's what freedom looked like. Not dramatic confrontations or perfect comebacks, just the quiet ability to receive someone's worst and feel nothing but compassion for how small their world must be. The wedding was in 3 days. I wouldn't be there. And for the first time in my life, That felt exactly right. I didn't attend Vanessa's wedding. I spent that Saturday doing exactly what I wanted. I slept late, went to a farmer's market, had lunch with Maya, attended a pottery class where I finished a bowl I'd been working on for weeks. I didn't check social media, didn't torture myself with wondering what I was missing. I simply lived my life, and it felt revolutionary. That evening, I was reading on my couch with tea, and my cat curled beside me when my phone rang. Jennifer. Her voice carried an edge of urgency mixed with something that sounded like vindication. Sophie, I need to tell you something about the wedding. Something happened that you should know about. I set my book down and listened. Jennifer explained that the wedding ceremony went smoothly, but the reception revealed cracks that had been forming for months. Marcus, Vanessa's fiancé, had been drinking heavily. Not celebratory drinking, but anxious, excessive drinking. During the speeches, Vanessa's maid of honor made a toast that included a joke about Vanessa finally finding a man who could afford her lifestyle. Marcus's expression went cold. Then came the moment that changed everything. During the father-daughter dance, my father pulled Vanessa aside after the song and said something to her quietly. Jennifer couldn't hear the full conversation, but she heard Vanessa's response. Sophie made her choice. Why does everything always have to be about her? My father's response was loud enough that several people nearby heard it. Because I failed her, and I'm watching myself fail you too, and I don't know how to fix either of you. Vanessa apparently became upset and walked away. My mother intervened, pulled my father aside, created a scene that several guests witnessed. The argument escalated. My mother accused my father of ruining Vanessa's special day by bringing up Sophie. My father responded that maybe Sophie was right about all of us. The wedding continued, but the atmosphere had shifted. Marcus became increasingly withdrawn. Vanessa oscillated between forced cheer and visible frustration. My mother spent the rest of the reception telling anyone who would listen that my father had been acting strange, that I had poisoned him against his own family. But Jennifer's call wasn't just about wedding drama. She had more important information. After the wedding, I spoke with Marcus's sister, Lauren. We were seated at the same table. Lauren had a few drinks and became very candid. She told me that Marcus has been having second thoughts about the marriage for months. She said Vanessa is financially dependent on him, that she quit her job shortly after they got engaged and has been spending extravagantly on the wedding and redecorating his house and planning expensive trips. She said Marcus feels trapped. I listened in silence. Jennifer continued. Lauren also mentioned that Vanessa talks constantly about you. Apparently, Vanessa brings you up in almost every conversation, complaining about you, comparing herself to you, obsessing over the fact that you didn't attend the wedding. Lauren said it's gotten so excessive that Marcus has asked Vanessa to stop talking about you, but she can't seem to help herself. This information settled over me like a revelation. Vanessa's identity had been so constructed around being better than me that my absence had created a void she didn't know how to fill. By refusing to play my assigned role, I'd inadvertently exposed how much Vanessa needed that role to exist. There's one more thing, Jennifer added. Your father left the reception early. He told Patricia he needed air, and he never came back. Patricia had to get a ride home with your aunt. I don't know where Robert went, but I know he was deeply upset. We talked for a few more minutes. Then I thanked Jennifer and hung up. I sat with this information. I felt no satisfaction in Vanessa's apparent marital problems. That wasn't revenge. That was just sad. But I did feel a strange sense of validation. The family dynamics I'd walked away from were collapsing without me there to stabilize them, to absorb the dysfunction, to play the scapegoat role that allowed everyone else to avoid their own issues. I'd been the glue holding together something that was never meant to hold. And now that I was gone, the cracks were showing. I went back to my book, finished my tea, let my cat stretch and resettle on my lap. The evening felt peaceful, quiet in a way that used to scare me, but now felt like home. Late that night, near midnight, my doorbell rang. Wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the intercom and saw my father standing outside, still in his wedding suit, looking exhausted and broken. For a moment I considered not answering. But something in his posture stopped me. This wasn't the passive man who'd stood by for 32 years. This was someone who'd finally broken. I buzzed him up, opened my apartment door, and waited. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. When he reached my floor, we stood there looking at each other. "Can I come in?" he asked. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. "Yeah," I said. "Come in." He walked past me into my small living room, stood there looking around like he'd never seen it before, even though he'd been here twice, once when I first moved in, once the Christmas before last. "I left the wedding," he said finally. "I heard." "Your mother is furious with me." "I imagine she is." He turned to face me. "I'm sorry, Sophie, for everything, for all of it. For every time I should have defended you and didn't. For every time I chose peace over protecting you. For being a coward when you needed a father." I stood there, not sure what to say. "I watched Vanessa tonight," he continued. "I watched her perform. I watched her drink too much and laugh too loud and try so hard to prove she was happy. And all I could think about was you. About how you're not performing anymore. About how you chose yourself. And I realized I've never been that brave. Dad, let me finish." He held up his hand. "I failed you. I know that now. I've known it for a while, but I didn't want to admit it because admitting it meant I had to change. And change is hard when you've been the same person for 64 years. He sat down on my couch, uninvited but welcome. "I don't know if I can fix this," he said. "I don't know if you even want me to try. But I'm here because I need you to know that you were right. About all of it. And I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." I looked at my father, really looked at him. And I saw someone who was finally, maybe, starting to wake up. My father stood in my doorway looking diminished. His wedding suit was rumpled. His face carried the weight of someone who'd finally seen something he couldn't unsee. I let him in, but didn't immediately offer comfort. I made tea, a neutral action that gave us both something to do with our hands. We sat at my small kitchen table. "I left the wedding," Robert said. "Unnecessarily. I couldn't stay. I couldn't watch it anymore." "Watch what?" I asked. "All of it. Your mother performing for the guests. Vanessa pretending to be happy while clearly panicking about something. Everyone acting like we're this perfect family when we're falling apart." His hands shook slightly as he held his teacup. "You were right, Sophie. About everything. And I've been too much of a coward to admit it until now." I didn't respond immediately. I'd learned not to accept apologies too, quickly, to let people sit with their own accountability. Robert continued. "During the father-daughter dance, I looked at Vanessa and I saw you. Not physically. You don't look alike. But I saw the same desperation I've watched in you for years. Vanessa was trying so hard to make everything perfect, to prove something, to be enough. And I realized I've done to her what your mother did to you, just in a different way." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I've let her build her entire identity on being the favorite, on being better than you, on having mom's approval. I've never taught her to value herself for who she is. I've just let her value herself for not being you. And now she's married to a man she barely knows, financially dependent on him, obsessed with maintaining an image, and she has no idea who she actually is underneath all that performance." His voice broke slightly. "I failed both of you. I failed you by not protecting you from your mother's favoritism. I failed Vanessa by letting her think that favoritism was love. I've spent 30 years taking the easy path, and now both my daughters are damaged because of it." I felt something complex moving through me. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. My father was finally seeing clearly, finally acknowledging his role, finally taking responsibility. It didn't erase the past, but it was more than I'd received from anyone else in my family. "Why now?" I asked. "Why are you finally seeing this now?" "Because you left," Robert admitted. "Because you stopped playing your role. And when you did, the whole system fell apart. I've been watching your mother spiral for months, getting more desperate to control you, more angry that her usual tactics aren't working. I've been watching Vanessa obsess over your absence, like she doesn't know how to exist without you to compare herself to. And I've been watching myself make excuses, try to smooth things over, ask you to compromise just a little bit more. He set down his teacup and looked directly at me. Tonight, during that argument with your mother, she said something that made everything clear. She said, Sophie was always going to leave eventually. She was never really ours. And I realized she was right, but not in the way she meant it. You were never really ours because we never really tried to know you. We assigned you a role and got angry when you wouldn't stay in it. What do you want from me, Dad? I asked quietly. Do you want me to forgive you? Do you want me to come back? Do you want me to fix things with Mom and Vanessa? No, Robert said. The answer surprised me. I want you to know that you were right. I want you to know that I see my failures clearly now, even if it's too late to fix them. I want you to know that I'm proud of you for being strong enough to walk away from people who didn't deserve you, even when one of those people was me. I felt tears building but didn't let them fall. I don't know if we can have a relationship, Dad. I don't know if I can trust you not to fall back into old patterns when Mom pressures you. I don't know either, Robert admitted. But I'd like to try. Not on your mother's terms or Vanessa's terms, on yours. Whatever that looks like, however long it takes, if you're willing to let me try. I considered this carefully. I thought about the father I needed versus the father I had versus the father sitting in front of me now. Finally honest. Finally accountable. I thought about whether redemption was possible for people who'd hurt you through absence rather than action. I need time, I finally said. I need you to prove through actions, not words, that you're actually willing to change. I need you to go to therapy. I need you to set boundaries with Mom about how she talks about me. I need to see consistent effort before I can trust you again. That's fair, Robert said. That's more than fair. We talked for another hour about specific things he could do, about what rebuilding trust might look like, about the fact that I couldn't have a relationship with him if it meant also having a relationship with my mother. He didn't argue, didn't make excuses, just listened and nodded and took responsibility. It was strange, sitting across from my father and having an honest conversation, feeling like he was actually hearing me for the first time in my life. Robert left near 1 in the morning. I sat alone in my apartment processing the conversation. I felt cautiously hopeful, but also wary. People don't change overnight. One honest conversation doesn't erase 32 years of neglect. I'd seen too many family members promise change and then fall back into old patterns the moment things got uncomfortable. But maybe this time was different. Maybe my father walking out of that wedding, choosing discomfort over complicity, was the beginning of something real. Or maybe I was setting myself up for more disappointment. I didn't know yet. 3 days later, I received a text from my father, a screenshot of his first therapy appointment confirmation, scheduled for the following week. No explanation, no request for praise, just proof that he was following through. I stared at that screenshot for a long time. It was a small gesture, but it was something. It was action, not words. It was him doing exactly what I'd asked without me having to remind him or push him or manage his emotions about it. I texted back, "Thank you for showing me." He responded immediately, "Thank you for giving me a chance." I set my phone down and looked around my apartment. My small, quiet, peaceful apartment. The life I'd built when I stopped waiting for my family's approval. And I realized something. Whether my father followed through or not, whether we rebuilt our relationship or not, I was going to be okay. Because I'd already done the hardest part. I'd chosen myself. Everything else was just details. 6 weeks after the wedding, Jennifer called with an update that was both shocking and somehow inevitable. Vanessa and Marcus had separated. The marriage lasted exactly 42 days before Marcus moved out of their shared home and filed for an annulment. Jennifer had details from Lauren, Marcus's sister, who'd been surprisingly forthcoming about the situation. According to Lauren, the problems that surfaced at the wedding only intensified afterward. Vanessa had planned an elaborate honeymoon to the Maldives. Expensive, luxurious, completely outside their agreed-upon budget. When Marcus expressed concern about the cost, Vanessa accused him of being cheap and not wanting to celebrate their marriage properly. The real breaking point came when Marcus discovered that Vanessa had opened 3 credit cards in his name without his knowledge. She'd accumulated over $40,000 in debt during their engagement and brief marriage. The charges were for designer clothes, home renovations, wedding expenses that Vanessa had told Marcus were covered by her parents. When confronted, Vanessa initially denied it, then minimized it, then blamed Marcus for making her feel insecure about money. Marcus's response was immediate and final. He moved out, filed for annulment based on fraud, cut off Vanessa's access to his accounts. Vanessa, who'd quit her job and been financially dependent on Marcus, suddenly found herself without income, without housing, with massive debt. My mother's response was predictable. She blamed me. According to Jennifer, my mother had been telling anyone who would listen that Vanessa's marriage fell apart because my selfishness and negativity created stress that undermined Vanessa's happiness. My mother had apparently convinced herself that if I'd attended the wedding and maintained family harmony, none of this would have happened. The logic was absurd. But I recognized the pattern. My mother couldn't accept that Vanessa's choices led to Vanessa's consequences. She couldn't acknowledge that the golden child she'd created was deeply flawed, financially irresponsible, and emotionally immature. So she needed a scapegoat. And I, even in my absence, served that purpose. Vanessa had moved back in with my parents. Jennifer reported that the household was tense, Vanessa alternating between depression and rage, my mother enabling and defending Vanessa's behavior, my father increasingly withdrawn and spending more time away from home. My therapy sessions helped me process this information without taking on guilt or responsibility. Dr. Morrison pointed out that Vanessa's financial fraud and marriage implosion had nothing to do with my boundaries. These were consequences of Vanessa's own choices, patterns that likely would have emerged regardless of my presence or absence. Your family is experiencing what happens when a dysfunctional system loses its stabilizing force, Dr. Morrison explained. You were absorbing so much of the family's dysfunction, being the scapegoat, being the responsible one, being the emotional dumping ground. Without you there to serve that function, the dysfunction is becoming visible to everyone. I thought about that, how I'd been holding everything together by accepting all the blame, how my absence had exposed the cracks that were always there. Jennifer also told me that extended family members were beginning to question my mother's narrative. Several relatives had reached out to her privately, expressing concern about my mother's behavior, asking about my perspective, the lawsuit attempt, the wedding drama. And now my mother's attempts to blame me for Vanessa's marriage failure had made some family members reconsider who the actual problem was. I didn't feel triumphant about any of this. I felt sad. Sad that my sister was struggling, sad that my mother was so invested in denial, sad that my family was imploding rather than healing, but I also felt clear. None of this was my responsibility to fix. I didn't cause these problems. I simply stopped accepting blame for them. My father continued attending therapy, checking in with me weekly. Our conversations were still somewhat stilted, still careful, but they were happening. He'd shared some of what he was learning in therapy, about enabling, about conflict avoidance, about his own family of origin issues that shaped his parenting. I appreciated his effort while remaining cautious about fully trusting him again. 2 months after Vanessa's separation, I received a Facebook message from her. I saw her name appear in my notifications and felt my stomach tighten. The message was long, rambling. It oscillated between apologetic and accusatory. Sophie, I know we haven't talked in a long time. I know things have been complicated between us. I'm going through a really hard time right now, and I keep thinking about you. I don't understand why you've cut yourself off from the family. I don't understand what I did that was so terrible that you couldn't even come to my wedding. Mom says you've always been jealous of me, but I don't think that's true. I think maybe you just don't like me. I don't know. Everything is falling apart, and I feel like if we could just talk, if you could just explain to me what I did wrong, maybe I could fix it. Can we meet? I need to talk to you. I need to understand why you hate me so much. I read it 3 times, each time finding new layers of manipulation mixed with what might be genuine confusion. Vanessa truly didn't understand. She genuinely couldn't see how 32 years of cruelty and competition and dismissal had damaged our relationship. She thought this was about one wedding, one choice, one moment of jealousy. She had no concept of the pattern, the lifetime, the accumulation of small cuts that became one deep wound. I stared at the message for a long time, my finger hovering over the delete button, weighing whether engaging with Vanessa would be healing or just reopening old wounds. Part of me wanted to respond, to explain, to make her understand, but another part of me, the part that had been growing stronger over these months, knew better. Vanessa wasn't asking to understand. She was asking me to fix her feelings, to absolve her, to take responsibility for her pain so she didn't have to examine her own behavior. She was asking me to come back and play my old role. And I'd worked too hard to be free of that role to step back into it now. I closed the message without responding. Then I called Dr. Morrison and scheduled an extra session. Because even though I knew the right choice, it still hurt to make it. I didn't respond to Vanessa's Facebook message immediately. I brought it to therapy, read it aloud to Dr. Morrison, examined my own motivations. Did I want to meet with Vanessa because I hoped for reconciliation? Or because I wanted to prove something? Was I ready to engage without getting pulled back into old dynamics? After careful consideration, I responded with a brief message. I don't hate you. I never have. If you genuinely want to talk, really talk, not perform or deflect, I'm willing to meet once. Coffee shop, public place, 1 hour. Vanessa agreed immediately. We scheduled a meeting for the following Saturday. I arrived early again, choosing the same coffee shop where we'd met months ago, recognizing the symbolism of returning to the scene of our last confrontation with new context. Vanessa arrived on time. I barely recognized her. She looked diminished. No designer clothes, minimal makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She'd lost weight. Not in a healthy way. She looked like someone who'd been hollowed out by consequence. We ordered coffee in silence. When we sat down, Vanessa didn't launch into immediate speech. She just sat there, holding her cup, looking at me with something that might be genuine vulnerability. I don't know how to do this, Vanessa finally said. I don't know how to talk to you without performing. I don't know how to be honest without making excuses. Try anyway, I suggested gently. Vanessa took a shaky breath. My marriage fell apart because I'm a mess. Not because you didn't come to the wedding. Not because of family stress. Not because Marcus was controlling. It fell apart because I'm 28 years old, and I have no idea who I am outside of being mom's favorite daughter. And you're opposite. I stayed quiet, letting her continue. I've been thinking about what you said last time we met, about how I built my identity on being better than you. You were right. I've spent my entire life defining myself by what I'm not rather than what I am. I'm not serious like Sophie. I'm not career-focused like Sophie. I'm not independent like Sophie. But I never figured out what I actually am. Vanessa's voice cracked. When you stopped playing your role, when you stopped being the family scapegoat, I didn't know how to exist. I didn't know how to be the favorite if there was no one to be favored over. So I tried harder to be perfect. To prove I deserved all the attention mom gave me, I planned this extravagant wedding. I tried to create this perfect life, and I destroyed it all because I have no sense of proportion, no sense of reality. Why are you telling me this? I asked, not unkindly. Because I owe you an apology, a real one, not the manipulative one Mom coached me through last time. Vanessa looked directly at me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for every cruel comment, every comparison, every time I participated in Mom's favoritism. I'm sorry for making you feel like you weren't enough when the truth is, I've never felt like enough either. I just hid it better. I felt something shift in my chest. this was different from the last conversation. Vanessa wasn't performing, wasn't deflecting, wasn't making excuses. She was taking genuine accountability. "I'm sorry for the lawsuit thing," Vanessa continued. "That was all Mom, but I didn't stop her. I should have stopped her. I should have told her it was insane and cruel. But I was angry at you for not being there for my wedding, and I wanted you to hurt the way I was hurting." "Why were you hurting?" I asked. "You got everything you wanted. The big wedding, Mom's total attention. Everyone focused on you." "Because none of it was real," Vanessa said simply. "The wedding was a performance. The marriage was a fantasy. Mom's approval is conditional on me staying exactly who she needs me to be. And you were the only person who ever saw through all of it. And you left. You left because we didn't deserve you. And you were right. But it still hurt." We talked for 2 hours, far exceeding my planned 1 hour limit. Vanessa shared details about her marriage failure, her financial situation, her struggles with depression. She was seeing a therapist now, living with our parents but looking for her own place, working part-time at a boutique while trying to figure out what she actually wanted to do with her life. I shared some of my own journey: therapy, boundary setting, building a life that felt authentic rather than performative. I told her about the peace I'd found in my small apartment, the friendships I'd deepened, the work I loved, the person I was becoming when I wasn't constantly trying to earn approval. Vanessa listened without interrupting, without comparing, without competing. "I'm jealous of you," she said finally, "but not the way Mom always said I should be. I'm jealous that you figured out how to leave, that you had the courage to choose yourself. I'm still trying to learn how to do that." "It's not too late," I told her. "You're 28. Your whole life is ahead of you." "I wasted so much time," Vanessa said. "So did I responded. 32 years trying to be enough for people who would never think I was. But we can't get that time back. We can only decide what we do now." The conversation didn't fix everything. One honest talk doesn't erase decades of hurt. But it was a beginning. A crack in the wall that had existed between us our entire lives. As we were leaving the coffee shop, Vanessa asked one more question. "Do you think we can ever be real sisters? Not the roles Mom assigned us, but actual sisters who know each other?" I considered this carefully. "I think we can try, but it has to be separate from Mom and her dynamics. It has to be just us, figuring out who we are to each other without her script." Vanessa nodded. "I can do that. I want to do that." For the first time in our lives, we hugged. Not a performative family gathering hug, not something staged for an audience, but something genuine and tentative and hopeful. When we pulled apart, Vanessa's eyes were wet. "Thank you for giving me a chance," she said. "Thank you for being honest," I replied. We walked to our cars in comfortable silence, and I realized something as I drove home. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean pretending the hurt never happened. It means choosing to see someone's humanity alongside their flaws, choosing to believe that people can grow, choosing to leave space for something new to emerge from something broken. I didn't know if Vanessa and I would build a real relationship. I didn't know if she'd follow through on the growth she was starting. I didn't know if our mother's influence would pull her back into old patterns. But I knew I'd given her a chance. And I'd done it with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. And that felt like enough. 6 months passed. My life continued to evolve in ways that felt increasingly authentic and peaceful. I'd been promoted at work, leading a new initiative for youth housing programs, the kind of work that felt meaningful. That reminded me why I'd chosen this career in the first place. I deepened friendships, started dating someone I met through my pottery class. His name was David, a high school teacher with kind eyes and an easy laugh. The relationship felt different from my previous ones. Easy, reciprocal. He didn't make me work constantly to prove my worth. I continued therapy, processing not just my family trauma, but building skills for healthy relationships and emotional regulation. My relationship with my father had slowly, carefully improved. Robert had stayed consistent with therapy. He'd begun setting boundaries with my mother, small ones at first, then gradually larger. He no longer reported everything I said back to her. He no longer tried to pressure me into family events or reconciliation I wasn't ready for. He respected my boundaries and proved through actions that he was changing. We had dinner once a month now, just the two of us. No Patricia, no Vanessa, no family drama. We talked about books, about work, about Robert's growing awareness of his own patterns. It wasn't the father-daughter relationship I'd needed as a child, but it was something real and honest, and that mattered. My relationship with Vanessa was more complicated, but also progressing. She'd started her own therapy journey, was working on rebuilding her life. She got a job in marketing, found a small apartment she could afford, was slowly paying down her debt. We texted occasionally, met for coffee every few weeks. We were learning each other as adults, discovering we actually had some things in common beneath the roles we'd been assigned. Vanessa was also gradually setting boundaries with our mother, though it was harder for her than it had been for me. She'd spent her entire life seeking Patricia's approval. Unlearning that pattern was painful and slow, but she was trying, and I respected that effort. My mother herself had not changed. She continued to paint herself as the victim of my cruelty, continued to tell anyone who would listen that I'd destroyed the family with my selfishness. But her audience had shrunk. Extended family members had largely stopped engaging with her narrative. Some had reached out to me directly, apologizing for believing her version of events without questioning it. I'd learned that I didn't need my mother's acknowledgement or apology to heal. I didn't need her to understand or accept my boundaries. Her inability to change was about her limitations, not my worth. This recognition brought me a deep sense of peace. I was no longer waiting for my mother's approval to feel valuable. My relationship with David developed into something serious. He came from a healthy, functional family that initially intimidated me with their easy affection and genuine interest in each other's lives. David's family welcomed me warmly, and I gradually learned what healthy family dynamics actually looked like. Disagreements that got resolved, support that didn't come with conditions, love that didn't require performance. One evening, David asked me about my family situation. I'd shared the basics, but he wanted to understand more deeply. We were sitting on his couch, rain tapping against the windows, his dog asleep at our feet. I told him the full story: the favoritism, the neglect, the boundaries I'd set, the fallout, the slow rebuilding with my father and sister, the permanent distance from my mother. David listened carefully. Then he said something that landed with unexpected weight. "You know what's remarkable about your story? You didn't become bitter. You didn't become like them. You broke the cycle." I looked at him, not sure what to say. "I mean it," he continued. "You could have responded to all that toxicity by becoming toxic yourself. You could have sought revenge that actually harmed people. You could have spread the pain that was inflicted on you, but you didn't. You chose to heal. You chose to build something different." I felt tears building, because he was right. I could have made different choices, worse choices, choices that would have damaged me further. Instead, I'd chosen peace over punishment. I thought about how far I'd come from that Thanksgiving dinner, where Vanessa's cruel comment finally broke something open inside me. The journey from that moment of humiliation to this moment of genuine peace. Not peace that required my family to change, but peace I'd built for myself by honoring my own worth. I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't making people pay for hurting you. It's refusing to let their hurt define you. It's building a life so full and authentic that their absence becomes a gift rather than a loss. It's choosing yourself, even when it costs you the only family you've ever known. David pulled me close, and I let myself lean into him, into this relationship that felt safe, into this life I'd created. My apartment was still small. My cat still knocked things off counters. My pottery bowl still wobbled slightly. But everything felt different now, because I was different. I was 33 years old, and for the first time in my life, I liked who I was. Not because I'd achieved enough or earned enough approval or fixed enough problems, but because I'd chosen to see my own value even when the people who should have seen it first never did. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect, I want you to know you're not alone. The journey from neglect to self-worth is hard and lonely, and sometimes it feels impossible, but it's worth it. You're worth it. Hit that like button if this story touched something in you. Subscribe if you want more stories about choosing yourself even when it's hard. Your support means everything. And maybe sharing stories like this helps us all feel less alone in the hard choices we sometimes have to make. Thank you for listening to mine. It was Thanksgiving again. Exactly 1 year since the dinner that changed everything. I spent it differently this year. Hosting a Friendsgiving at my apartment with Maya, David, a few close friends, and surprisingly, Vanessa. Robert came too, bringing wine and his famous roasted Brussels sprouts, the one dish he'd always made that my mother never appreciated. The gathering was small, warm, genuine. People laughed easily. Conversations flowed naturally. No one was performing. No one was competing. When we went around the table sharing what we were grateful for, I felt the words land in my chest with real weight. I'm grateful for the courage to choose peace over performance. I'm grateful for people who see me and love me for who I actually am. Vanessa shared too, her voice steadier than I'd heard it in years. I'm grateful for second chances. I'm grateful for a sister who held up a mirror even when I didn't want to look. I'm grateful for learning who I am outside of who I was supposed to be. Robert's gratitude was simple but profound. I'm grateful for children who are braver than I was. I'm grateful for the opportunity to do better, even if it's later than it should have been. After dinner, as Vanessa and I cleaned up together, she mentioned that our mother had been asking about me, wondering if I might consider reconciliation now that enough time had passed. Vanessa didn't push, just relayed the information neutrally. I considered this carefully. I was no longer angry at my mother. Anger requires emotional investment, and I'd withdrawn that investment. I felt something closer to sad acceptance. Patricia was who she was, limited by her own wounds and unwilling to do the work to heal them. I'm not interested in reconciliation that requires me to pretend the past didn't happen, I said. If Mom ever genuinely acknowledges how she treated me and does real work to change, I'd consider it. But I'm not holding my breath, and I'm not waiting for it to be happy. Vanessa nodded. That's fair. I think I'm getting there too, accepting that Mom might never be capable of the relationship we needed from her. Later that evening, after everyone had left except David, I stood at my apartment window looking out at Portland's city lights. David came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Good day? He asked. Really good day, I confirmed. Different from last year. Tell me about last year, David prompted. Though he knew the story, I thought about that version of myself, the woman who drove 4 hours hoping for crumbs of approval, who made a family recipe hoping to be seen, who sat at that table absorbing cruelty and calling it love. I thought about the journey from that moment to this one, all the pain and growth and hard choices in between. Last year, I was still trying to earn something I already deserved, I said. I was still performing for an audience that would never applaud. I was still making myself small so other people could feel big. And now, David asked, now I know my worth doesn't depend on their recognition. Now I have people in my life who see me clearly and love me anyway, or maybe because of who I actually am. Now I understand that the best revenge isn't making them pay. It's refusing to let them define me. I turned in David's arms, looking at him directly. Now I'm just happy, genuinely, authentically happy. And that's something I never thought I'd be able to say. He kissed my forehead, and we stood there together, looking out at the city lights. I thought about everything that had led to this moment. The Thanksgiving dinner where Vanessa's comment finally broke something open inside me. The drive home where I decided I was done. The boundaries I set. The lawsuit my mother filed. The wedding I didn't attend. The slow rebuilding with my father. The tentative reconciliation with my sister. The therapy sessions. The hard conversations. The moments of doubt when I wondered if I'd made the right choice. And I realized something. Every hard choice had been worth it. Every boundary I'd set had protected something precious. Every time I'd chosen myself over family harmony, I'd chosen life over slow death. I wasn't the villain my mother painted me as. I wasn't selfish or cruel or ungrateful. I was just a woman who'd finally learned to value herself as much as she'd always valued everyone else. Outside, the city lights glowed steady and warm. Inside, my life felt the same, steady, warm, and finally, peacefully my own. I'd spent 32 years trying to be enough for people who would never think I was, and then I'd spent 1 year learning to be enough for myself. That was the real story. Not the dramatic confrontations or the family implosion or the revenge that never came. Just the quiet, revolutionary act of choosing peace, of building a life that felt true, of surrounding myself with people who loved me not despite my boundaries, but because of my courage to set them. I looked at David, at my apartment filled with the warmth of friends who'd just left, at the life I'd built from nothing but my own determination to be free, and I smiled, because this was what winning looked like. Not my mother's apology, not my family's recognition, not vindication or validation from the people who'd hurt me. Just this, just peace, just me, finally home in my own life.